All right. Thank you, everyone, for being here. We've got an exciting panel here. Investors of different stripes and origins and geography. So it'll be great. Maybe before we get into the investment thesis, would be awesome to kind of start to talk about what does the interchain and multi-chain world look like in the next 5, 10 years, right? And how that drives these investors' decisions. So I think with that, let's dive into it. We've got a lot of ground to cover. Maybe we'll start with Travis. What does the interchain world look like in your fund's view, and how does that impact your decision in terms of investments?
I think that the future of the crypto ecosystem is that it's a complex, interoperable network of networks. We're going to have Ethereum, which has the most users, the most security. People are going to build roll-ups on top of that. You're going to have, other monolithic chains like Solana that are more scalable, more optimized for composability. And then you're going to have the Cosmos ecosystem, where people who want to build their own chain, spin up their own validator network so that they can customize more parameters, will do so. And I think all of this will be stitched together by networks like Axelar.
That's awesome. Well, maybe another point of view, Ty, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's amazing that we keep on seeing more and more L1. I think we already have like more than 200 L1s already, but we still keep on seeing more and more. And L2 as well, right? Last week we saw Coinbase coming out with based on optimism. And then, like Travis said, Cosmos also have so many app chains coming out. But I think with all this, we won't have any chain that rule them all, not a single chain. But we're going to have a multi-chain world. And when we have something like this, liquidity is going to be fragmented. And we need to have the interoperability that much more improved than this. And generic messaging protocol like Axelar is going to be the key to actually make the interoperability improve. So,
yeah, no, that's great. That's great. So let's dig a little bit more. Like historically, the architecture is dApps on L1 chains, right? And that's still true by and large today. Let's go to Adam, because Adam, you and I have talked a little bit about this before this conference, just in terms of, that's the architecture today. Where does the architecture go over time, and what is the almost the right abstraction layer for dApps to build on, right?
Well, look, to Travis's point, there's a lot of different chains that are going to have different use cases. At the end of the day, the reason people got excited about Bitcoin and Ethereum was it was this new sort of money, this new reserve currency that mattered to people. And at the end of the day, whoever wins the interchain thesis, and it might be one person, it might be just or several people, could be the reserve currency for all the blockchain ecosystem. And from the perspective, we think about it from the perspective of a developer who wants one API to access a bunch of services. There may be app chains from Cosmos. There may be infrastructure projects built on EigenLayer. There may be something built on an Avalanche subnet. There may be individual chains out there. And as an app developer, you don't want to manage all these APIs. Who can abstract that for you? And whoever can extract that for you and build the messaging layer that connects all of that, their currency may become the reserve currency. So, from our perspective, that's how we're looking at it, and that you can dissect that and think of multiple ways for to invest your money along that thesis.
Yeah, that's interesting, because this dovetails a little bit also into Marek. I'll move to you a bit, because you and I also talked about before, the various architectural shifts in addition to what Adam was talking about in terms of vertical, horizontal scaling, modularity. As far as Rockaway is concerned, right? Like, when you look at all those, like, how does that impact investment thesis for you guys?
So for us, I think there's going to be like multiple ways how to approach it, and there's like different trade-offs for different people, right? So I think it was already mentioned, like we have hundreds of chains, and there's different, let's say, use cases or that are good to deploy on these. There is like some are optimized for finality, throughput, scalability, and others. And so like all of these L1s are getting like also like different roadmaps how they will approach in the future, and that's how they will shape their unique selling propositions towards the teams that are going to be building on them. And I think like like modularity is even just like increasing the complexity, but we definitely need to have some kind of a stitching element that enables the teams that are deploying to abstract this complexity when deploying. Because like from the perspective of the teams, I think Adam has mentioned it, right? So I think like one way how the architecture was like deploying the smart contracts on the L1, but I think then from what we have seen, then there was like there's a lot of copy paste of the projects that were like deploying the same idea without much innovation, just on the different chains, and they were getting funded, they were getting as well, let's say some kind of attraction. However, then I think now, when I'm thinking about it from the user perspective, if you just like flip it around, like users don't typically want to be thinking about different chains. So like also like with the Web3 going into the mass adoption, it's very important to actually have like a unified use case, like whether it's like borrowing, lending, or whatever. And it cannot be borrowing on chain X. It needs to be literally a use case specific for the user. And the blockchain or the infrastructure elements, similarly as we have it in Web2, needs to be abstracted for the user. And so I think like this is something that will happen. I think there's like multiple architecture types that could happen. So like I can imagine that like we will, what I would call move from this like smart contract and layer 1 to let's say like a level 2, where we have like multiple smart contracts on different chains, and then they are being just like they're being coordinated by like a communication layer, for example, like Axelar, but also like I can imagine that like here we will see a competition, and like the competition is actually happening. And then I think there's like a layer 3 where we actually have managed to abstract this complexity fully. And in this, I think even the execution itself can be pushed to this messaging layer, or which can be projects such as Axelar or like any other.
Yeah, that's great. That's an interesting viewpoint. I feel like, heterogeneity, right, and complexity suppression is two of the big themes that I think we've heard today and from you guys as well. So, with that kind of context set, let's get down to the meat of it. Let's start from Thai, going down there. Given all those that you just said, what does your Interchain thesis look like? What sectors or subsectors are you guys and your team excited about in the next 6, 12, 24 months?
Yeah, with the Interchain world thesis, I think Bridge have been seeing a lot of investment and continue to be very popular. But I think the securities area is the key concern for Bridge. Last year, we already seen 2.5 billion got hacked from Bridge. And Bridge is the area that has seen the most exploit compared to other applications. So what I'm interested in is actually in the security area of Bridge. So I want to see the specialization on security audit, because like in general, if we look at Web 2, right? Web 2 in different area of application, you see different security auditor. And I think Web 3, we should also have that type of thing. Because normally when you have different applications, there are different considerations when it comes to security. So we need to see that. And we would be looking for this type of investment for the startup that trying to become more specialized security auditor.
I'm betting on folks like Sergey, who, if you heard his last presentation, I'm betting on folks like Sergey to execute well and for them to build these general messaging protocols that are going to make it super interesting for app developers to build not only Interchain, but more useful applications that incorporate all sorts of new middleware services and make it easy for those middleware services to integrate with that API. And so therefore, we're very focused on middleware and things that are going to make blockchains more useful, higher utility, that can plug into messaging layers built by folks like Axelar.
So when we launched our fund about 3-4 years ago, our thesis was that in its end state, crypto is this interoperable network of networks, like the internet, where assets and messages can move seamlessly across chains, across the world. We thought that was going to take a very long time. We met Sergey. He convinced us to invest. The risk at the time, second half of 2020, was that it was too early to build something like that. Since then, the greater risk has been that there's too much competition. We entered this multi-chain world faster than I think anybody expected. And where we think this ends up is that there are these natively multi-chain applications that aren't tied to a single piece of infrastructure. However, it's very early for that, and so over the next 6-12 months, what we'll continue to do is investing in infrastructure that enables the creation of those applications. And so, we've made a bunch of investments, particularly in the Cosmos ecosystem. It's where most of, I think, the best infrastructure and best is getting built by the strongest developers who are aligned with this thesis. And I think, maybe in 1-2 years, we'll see more exciting opportunities in the sort of native multi-chain application space.
I would maybe structure it first about application and then infrastructure. On the application side, I think teams building user-focused, let's say cross-chain native applications. So I think those we find exciting. On the infrastructure, I like to think what are still unsolved problems. On one hand, I think scaling is still a problem. I think we will see some rollups that are settling on multiple chains, possibly utilizing ZK technology. I think that's going to be very exciting. I still think privacy is a problem. So I think we are living in the blockchain world where we have pseudo-anonymity. I don't think on the time horizon of 5 years is going to be sufficient condition to have pseudo-anonymity. I think anonymity will be a required condition for a mass adoption. And then I think lastly, it's let's say something aligned to a theme of easy deployment of either apps, rollups, and others.
Yeah, no, that's great. One of the threat and themes I think you guys kind of touch upon is sort of, infrastructure enabling dApps more valuable, more multi-functional dApps, and better user experience to kind of float up, right? And we've seen this in Web 1, Web 2, where Cisco's of the world kind of laid the foundation and enable the Facebooks of the world and the Googles of the world to kind of enable almost a magical experience, right? Connectivity and the like. So this is more of an open question for any of you guys, right? Do you see that happening in Web 3 anytime soon where, if we look back the last 5-10 years, the base layer protocols have captured a lot of the economic rent, less so on the dApps, with some exceptions. What do you guys make of that moving forward?
Okay, I take that.
Yeah.
So I think you're talking about FAT protocol thesis.
Yes, it's for you guys have not heard of the FAT protocol thesis. I think it's USV that came out with it a few years ago. That basically says most of the economic rent capture is going to happen at the base layer protocols, right? And I've always been skeptical, right? That may be true in the short and medium term. I'm curious what you guys think.
Yeah, no, I think that when he came out with that thesis, it was 2016. So before we have multi-chain world. And I think in his thesis, he was thinking that there will be probably a single chain that will be monopolized and dominant. And that's how the FAT protocol thesis is coming out, because the thesis was that the protocol, the crypto protocol, will be able to capture more value than the dApps that building on top. And that was because the dApp will have to use the native protocol tokens to power all the interactions. But then now we have multi-chain worlds, and I think we all talk about it, that we don't think that there will be a single chain that rule them all, because there will be a lot of chains. And in my opinion too, that users will also use different chains for different activities based on their needs and their utility. That that offering by each chain. And so like the monopoly wise, it's not going to be that much. And then on top of that, now we also see some of the dApps that actually have very strong brand equity, like Uniswap, for example, right? Everybody know Uniswap, how good they are. And let's say today, if Uniswap are going to go to new chain, completely new chain, it will definitely get more traction much easier than like a Fox, Uniswap app, because like Uniswap already have this brand equity. The user know what they will get, and then also they're going to get like all these liquidity providers that already work with them to probably move with them to the new chain as well. So now we also have dApp that are quite powerful with strong brand equity that back then Joe Monegro didn't think about it before. So I think that because of this, FAT protocol thesis is not going away, but the significance of it is going to be much less.
Anyone else chime in?
I mean, I agree with that. I think that the value of an underlying protocol has something to do with the volume of transactions on the protocol and the amount of fees that you're able to charge per transaction, right? At the end of the day, that's how protocol should be valued. In a world of many chains, there's much more competition, and so there's much more pressure on the fee side. I also think in a world where you have something like Axelar as a developer platform, where things get abstracted over the longer term, users should not have to care about what chain their applications are running on or what chain their assets are living on. Something like Axelar could deploy those applications and assets on whatever chain is best suited for the underlying use case. And so, I think for something like Ethereum that has this, what seems to be an extremely sticky user base, there'll still be a lot of value accrual. But for, the rest of the ecosystem, there's going to be a lot of competition, and it's hard to say what the defensible moat will be for some of these other blockchains. And so I think that some of the applications that really do own the end user relationship, and I'm not sure if Uniswap really qualifies there because it's not necessarily an ongoing relationship. But say you have sort of a multi-chain identity system of some sort, where people they start using it to build up a reputation or to control their own data for use cases that occur cross-chain, and they have to keep using it to keep benefiting from it. Those sorts of applications will be defensible and have moats and be really sticky, and have real network effects over the longer term. So that's my best guess right now on how the value accrual plays out.
Adam?
I'd like to make a comment, maybe part question for Travis. I mean, when I think about the FAT protocol thesis, it initially started talking about these independent chains, but that was before we imagined things like Axelar. So, I mean, could you apply the FAT protocol thesis to an Axelar and where it sits and becoming the API messaging layer and that capturing the value over the dApps?
Yeah, I mean, we're not here just to talk up Axelar.
Well, listen, we can talk about CCIP and
no,
the same breath.
totally
I just didn't want to
agree
mention
with
their
you.
name, but you forced me to.
It could be Axelar, it could be somebody else. I think it'll be Axelar, but you basically have this protocol that plugs into all these different chains that starts out moving messages and assets across chains. But at the end of the day, if this is where developers go to initially deploy some of their applications, it could serve as sort of this meta layer on top of all these blockchains that have all this branding and all this sort of tribal loyalty today. But over the longer term, people may not care about them if they're not really differentiated. What will accrue value is the infrastructure that ends up being really sticky, and it could be something like Axelar.
Yeah, I mean, way I saw it. Sorry, Marek, I'll just finish this thought. Is like, hey, Ethereum could still be like this place that captures most of the value of the L1 layer. Like Intel, like AMD was created to help chip buyers feel comfortable with buying chips from Intel. Like they wanted a second source. So even if every other chain is just a second source overflow for Ethereum, like Ethereum can still capture a lot of value. Chainlink and Axelar can fight it out for the messaging layer. And then I think your point is great. Is like someone's going to own the customer, some identity play, whether it's tied to a wallet or something that abstracts the wallet, and then these three big players are duking it out in some sort of like tech dystopian, version of the FANG stocks all over again. I mean, it could play out that way. So,
Marek, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, so I do think that there is going to be more value coming to the applications itself, but there's like multiple trends there. So I think like one is also that I think like we will see more complex application going live, and that will enable them to actually have like much more significant mode. Like it's either through the go-to-market, distribution, business relationships that they are able to form, and that actually will more like grow the pie. So like if I'm like thinking about like like the applications being able to extract like let's say a small part of the whole value chain, I think it will grow because of the complexity and the value add that they are able to create, right? And so that's like one thought. And then second is, okay, like in the Fed chain, or like, Fed protocol thesis, then there's like the remaining value and like how it's going to be distributed. I think like it's fair to say that like the fact that we have, multiple chains, I don't think that is actually like going against any single chain, because like if you have two chains, then like you have applications on top of it. And there are, the reason why it was the applications were not able to extract as much value is because of their lack of mode. However, I think like that's like changing, and also I agree that like because we have the interoperability, we will actually need to somehow redistribute the messaging layer and like the settlement. However, I think we cannot like we should not forget that like the security that the L1 is actually bringing to have the entire ecosystem is like a fundamental value that needs to be there. For the blockchain actually to exist and like secure the assets that are on top of it. So I still think that there's going to be a significant value accrual in multiple settlement layers.
Yeah, I mean, I think, multi-chain is ultimately all about, another layer or another level of decentralization, right? Different use cases, generic, specific. With that, maybe I'll switch a little bit and talk a bit about some of the recent events that's happened, from a regulatory standpoint, right? I'm curious to overlay that view for you guys. Does some of the chatter and actions from the SEC, from regulators in the U.S. specifically, does that impact any of your thesis when you guys look at deals? Anyone?
Look, my view is that the vast majority of tokens in this ecosystem should not be treated as securities. And they certainly shouldn't be subject to securities law that's 80 plus years old. I think the SEC's position currently is the opposite of that the vast majority should be treated as securities and that the old law applies, even though there's no practical way to apply it. I think that there's tremendous regulatory headwinds in the U.S. There's an immense dichotomy between the actual energy and the ecosystem amongst developers, which is amazing. Apparently, there's 25,000 people here this week, and some of the energy in the broader world, which is super negative on crypto. So, for us, I think it does mean that we want to be a little bit more cautious over the next year in terms of our investment pace. I also think. I've always done a lot of investing outside of the U.S. We've done a lot recently. I think that we probably are seeing more new companies building out of the U.S. We've seen entrepreneurs leave the country to start their businesses, and I also think that there's a little bit of a case of maybe the dog that didn't bark, where there's real chilling in the U.S. right now. So there's probably tremendous number of talented people who would be starting businesses in crypto if the regulators in DC weren't so hostile.
I mean, I'll just say, like, kind of building on that point, my view is I want to be very aggressive with investing right now, but I want companies to have a really long runway, because it is so uncertain and you don't know how it's going to play out, and you need to pivot and you need to stay alive and just adapt to whatever this cycle is going to be. But on the regulatory side, it's really hard to predict. And I mean, I look at a lot of things internationally, despite I hear a lot about, Hong Kong opening up. UK regulatory authority is being really aggressive with courting the crypto community. I still see, a lot of really strong U.S. founders. And the ones I know are building here. They're not moving away. But they, have to contend with a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah. And then for our other two panelists, Ty and Marek, and you guys are based in Asia and Europe respectively. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think the SEC, the regulators are definitely driving activity outside US, because right now I think it's like regulation by prosecution, because like they try to go after, like, let's say Kraken, right, on staking, and then Paxos on stablecoin. And then now I think that DeFi is going to be under scrutiny as well. And the founders who are not anon before probably like be thinking maybe they want to be anon as well. Or if they are still based in US, because of all this regulation, they might the regulation might be coming after DeFi as well. So they might also thinking about moving out of US. We definitely see, exactly like Adam said, that Hong Kong is opening up. They're now being more friendly towards crypto, because I think they try to get the financial hub status back to the country. And so now they're coming out with like, the proposal that allow retail investors to be able to trade large cap tokens like Ethereum, Bitcoin, in the license exchange, and also propose like the license regime for virtual asset trading platform, things like that. And then Singapore continue to be crypto friendly, but a bit thoughtful, because I think there's a lot of things that happening in Singapore. Like Terra was actually based in Singapore when it collapsed, and then FTX was like in Hong Kong. But there's a lot of involvement around Singapore ecosystem as well. And actually, like Singapore was like number 5th biggest user for FTX. And so, yeah, Singapore is a bit more thoughtful, but continue to be friendly. So I think that there will be a lot of activity shift to Asia. And I think recently Cameron Winklevoss also tweeted out that he thinks that the next bull run of crypto will be coming out of the East. I think it might be possible.
Yeah, I mean, like from our perspective, I think like as investors, like we need to stay optimistic, right? So like as an early stage investor, like you always believe in the possible future, and I think always innovators are like like pushing on the boundaries, sometimes even boundaries of the law. From the perspective, from like the European perspective, or let's say like on the reaction of US, I think like crypto was always like global first. So yes, like US regulation is important, but there is like the whole world to actually like capture. So like I think it's very okay, and like I think like it will find its path. And from the European perspective, like what we are seeing, that like the ecosystem is like quite strong. Like one from the developer perspective, I think like London and Switzerland, they have like a very strong like research base from or like people like pushing new projects. From the legal standpoint, like Switzerland is like very friendly to set up foundations that are crypto native, and then also like I think Lisbon, even though like we don't see a lot of like number-wise, I think like projects, but or incorporating, but actually like people living in Lisbon. So I think it's also like becoming a hub or like has become a hub and sufficiently competing for people to actually come and live. So I think like like US turning the negative sides towards crypto, I think just like opening up opportunities for other countries to compete for that.
Yeah, that's great. We are unfortunately down to the last minute. Let's see if we can go through this very quickly. For each panelist, non-obvious prediction you have for the next 12 months. Limited to like 5 seconds. Ty?
Well, it's very hard. but in my opinion, I think that regulation should be good. There will be a lot of regulation for sure, but in my mind, it will provide clarity and that will also make institutional investor to feel more comfortable with crypto and come in more.
Adam?
God, that's a hard one. Non-obvious. Okay, that non-obvious prediction is that users are going to get paid for their data within the next
that's a good one.
18 months
I like that.
and want to get paid for their data.
Oh. Travis?
Yeah, I don't know if I have a non-obvious prediction. I don't like predictions. But I think that, 2022 was a catastrophic, somewhat traumatic year for many people in the industry. I think this year, is not going to be that bad, but there's a ton of headwinds on the macro side, on the regulatory side. User adoption fundamentally is still extremely low. So, I think that the latter half of this year, things could actually just get potentially a little bit more boring. That in that way would be very different than, times in the past. And I think that, as founders or employees at crypto startups, I think psychology is going to be as important as strategy, for maximizing your medium-term, long-term success.
Marek?
It's a difficult one. I think so. We will be surprised with some of the progress that ZK will make during this year. I think we will see some first real applications, maybe even outside of the blockchain.
I like it. Finally coming. Well, with that, guys, thank you so much. Round of applause for the panelists.
All right.